$94,000. That's what I gave my son-in-law to start his business. And when I asked my daughter if I could come to his 50th birthday party, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "Mom, you don't need to come. He doesn't want to see you." She had no idea that sentence was about to cost him everything. 3 days later, I sent one letter to the right address at the right moment, and by the end of that week, that same daughter was standing on my porch crying, begging me to forgive her, while her husband scrambled to find $94,000 he thought he'd never have to pay back. I am 71 years old, and nobody in that family knew what I was capable of until the week they tried to erase me. If you have ever been pushed out of your own family for the sake of someone else's comfort, if you have ever been told to sit down and stay quiet so nobody gets upset, you are going to want to hear this from the beginning. My name is Patricia. I am 71 years old. And this is the story of the week my family found out that a quiet old woman is still a woman with a spine. Before I start, if this story is going to matter to you, hit that like button right now and subscribe to this channel because I've got more stories where this one came from. And in the comments, tell me where in the world you are watching this from tonight. I read every single one of them, and I love knowing who's sitting with me while I tell you this. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. I raised my daughter alone for the better part of her childhood. Her father passed when she was 9, and I worked double shifts at the hospital for years so she could have piano lessons and new shoes and a college fund that I filled up dollar by dollar, nickel by nickel, until she graduated without a single loan to her name. I am not telling you this to brag. I am telling you this so you understand what it means when I say I gave that girl everything I had. She got married 4 years ago. I liked her husband well enough at first. He was polite in that stiff, performative way some men are around their mother-in-law. All firm handshakes and yes ma'am, no ma'am. I told myself that was just nerves. I told myself a lot of things looking back. The trouble didn't come all at once. It came in inches. First it was small things. A birthday dinner I wasn't invited to because it was just going to be the two of them and some friends. Then it was holidays that quietly shrank from including me to not including me at all, with some excuse dressed up nice enough that I couldn't quite call it what it was. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself my daughter was just busy, just building her own life, just doing what young people do. Then came the anniversary party. It was her husband's 50th birthday, and she was throwing him a big celebration, caterers, string lights in the backyard, 40 guests. I found out about it because I saw the caterer's van outside their house 3 weeks early when I dropped off a casserole. I asked her about it, casual as I could manage, and I watched her face do something I will never forget. She got that look people get when they're caught, when they're trying to decide how much of the truth they can get away with telling you. "Mom," she said, not quite looking at me, "you don't need to come to this one. He doesn't want to see you there." I want you to sit with that sentence for a moment the way I had to sit with it. Not we're keeping the guest list small. Not it's complicated right now. He doesn't want to see you. As if I were an ex-girlfriend. As if I were a stranger who had wandered into their lives uninvited. Instead of the mother who had carried her, raised her, and never once, not one single time, missed a birthday, a graduation, a hospital visit, a heartbreak. I asked her why. She wouldn't say. She just kept repeating that it wasn't a big deal, that I shouldn't make it into something, that I should just let it go for the sake of peace in the family. Peace in the family. As if my presence at my own daughter's home was the thing threatening the peace, and not whatever was actually going on behind that closed door. I want to tell you that I yelled. I want to tell you I made a scene because Lord knows I wanted to. But I am 71 years old, and I have buried a husband, and I have learned that the loudest reaction is rarely the smartest one. So I did something instead that surprised even me. I said, "All right." Just that. All right. And I went home. But I did not let it go. Not for one single second. Here is something you should know about me. I may be 71, and my knees may creak going up the stairs, and I may need my readers to check a menu in a dim restaurant, but I built a filing system for that family that would put half the accountants I know to shame. When my husband passed 11 years ago, I inherited more than his life insurance. I inherited a small rental property he'd bought in the 90s, a modest but steady little duplex that had quietly paid for itself twice over in the years since. 3 years into my daughter's marriage, her husband came to me with a business idea. He wanted to open a small contracting company, and he needed startup capital, permits, equipment, insurance, the whole business. My daughter cried on my couch and told me how much this meant to him, how he'd never had anyone believe in him the way she believed in him, And would I please consider helping? I sold that rental property. I want you to understand what that meant. That property was my safety net. That property was the thing standing between me and ever being a burden to my daughter in my old age. I sold it, and I gave that man $94,000 in cash, with nothing but a handshake and a promise that he would pay me back over time as the business grew. I never saw a dime of it back. Not one dime. Every time I brought it up gently, the way you bring up something delicate with family, there was always a reason. The business was still finding its feet. Money was tight this quarter. Next year, Mom, I promise, next year. So when my own daughter looked at me in her kitchen and told me the man I had funded, the man whose entire livelihood existed because I had sold my safety net for his sake, didn't want to see me at his own birthday party, something in me went very, very still. Not angry yet. Just still. The way the ocean gets still right before it decides to do something you won't forget. I went home that night and I did not cry. I sat down at my kitchen table with a cup of tea going cold beside me, and I opened the old accordion folder where I keep my important papers, and I found the handwritten agreement he and I had signed the day I handed over that $94,000. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't drawn up by a lawyer. But it was signed, dated, and witnessed by my next-door neighbor, and it was very clear about the terms. Repayment was to begin within 18 months. That was 3 years ago. I did not crash that birthday party. I want to be clear about that because I know some of you are expecting me to show up at the gate in my Sunday best and cause a scene, and that is not who I am, and honestly that is not how you win. Instead, I did something quieter and I promise you so much more effective. 2 days before the party, I called a lawyer. Not a fancy one, just a good, sensible woman named Ms. Alvarez who my late husband's cousin had used for her own small business years back. I brought her the folder. I brought her the signed agreement. I brought her 3 years of text messages where he'd promised repayment soon over and over again, each one time-stamped, each one a little brick in a wall of proof. She looked it all over and she looked up at me and she said, "Patricia, this is about as clean a case as I've ever seen. You could have sent him a formal demand for repayment a year ago." I know, I told her. I was being a mother. I was trying to keep the peace. "Well," she said, "it sounds to me like the peace has already been broken. Just not by you." We drew up a formal demand letter that day. Not threatening. Not cruel. Just factual, just clear. Full repayment of the outstanding balance, with the interest that had accrued as outlined in our original signed agreement, due within 30 days or the matter would proceed to small claims court, where Ms. Alvarez assured me, given the paper trail I had, I would win without much of a fight at all. I had that letter delivered by courier to his contracting business on the morning of his 50th birthday party. Not to his home, to his business, where his new employees and his business partner, and anyone else standing in that office would see a courier walk in with an envelope stamped with a law office's return address. I did not do that to humiliate him in front of strangers, though I won't pretend I didn't think about the timing. I did it because for 3 years I had asked nicely, in private, in kitchens and over phone calls, and I had been managed and placated, and eventually erased from a party in my own family for my trouble. I decided that if quiet, private, family conversations weren't going to be respected, then the conversation was going to move somewhere it would be. That evening, while 40 guests were arriving at that backyard with its string lights, my phone rang. It was my daughter. She was not crying with anger. She was crying with fear, the kind of fear that comes from watching your comfortable little arrangement start to wobble. "Mom, what did you do?" she said. "He's furious. He says you humiliated him in front of his whole team." And I said something to her then that I had been holding inside me for 3 years, maybe longer. I said, "I didn't humiliate him, sweetheart. I asked him politely for 3 years to return money that was never a gift. I have never once raised my voice about it. I have never once told a single soul outside this family what he owes me. Until today, when a lawyer sent a letter to a business address. If that is humiliating to him, then he humiliated himself the day he decided $94,000 of my dollars was easier to spend than to repay." There was a long silence on the line. "Why didn't you tell me?" she finally asked. "Why didn't you tell me it was that bad?" And that, my friends, was the real question, wasn't it? Not why I'd sent the letter. Why I had carried this alone for 3 years without telling my own daughter the truth, because I had been trying every single day to protect her marriage more than I had ever been willing to protect myself. Here is what I did not know, sitting in my kitchen with my cold tea that first terrible night. My daughter did not know the full truth either. She knew there had been a loan. She did not know it was $94,000. She did not know it was every cent I had left from her father's life insurance and the sale of that rental property. She had been told by her husband that it was some money I had wanted to invest in the business, a framing that made it sound like my choice, my risk, my gamble, rather than what it actually was, a mother handing over her entire financial safety net because her daughter cried on a couch. When she found out the real number, when Miss Alvarez's letter and the conversation that followed finally forced the truth into the light, my daughter did not defend him. I want you to know that because I know some of you are bracing for a story where the daughter stays loyal to the husband no matter what. She didn't. She drove to my house the next morning, and she sat on my porch step, and she cried in a way I hadn't seen her cry since she was small enough to skin her knee on the sidewalk. He told me it was a small loan, she said. He told me you offered. He told me you didn't want it talked about because you didn't want it to feel awkward between us. I never said that, I told her, and I believed her when she said she hadn't known, because I know my daughter, and I know the particular shame in her eyes when she has been lied to and used as a shield for someone else's lie. She did not know that the reason she'd been told he doesn't want to see you at the party had nothing to do with me at all, and everything to do with the fact that he knew deep down that if I stood in that backyard long enough, surrounded by his new business partner and his contractor friends, someone was eventually going to ask how the business got started, and the truth was going to come out on its own without any letter, without any lawyer, just from an old woman standing quietly in a corner with a long memory and a longer patience. He hadn't uninvited me to protect her feelings. He'd uninvited me to protect his secret. I am not going to sit here and tell you I dragged that man through court in some dramatic finale with gavels banging and cameras flashing. That's not how these things usually go. And it isn't how mine went either. What actually happened was quieter, and in its own way more satisfying. Facing a signed agreement, a documented paper trail, and a lawyer who clearly knew what she was doing, he agreed to a repayment plan rather than risk a judgment and the damage that a public small claims filing might do to a young contracting business that depended on its reputation. Over the following 14 months, I received a payment on the first of every month without fail, until every cent of that $94,000, plus the interest we'd agreed on from the very beginning, was back in my account. But the money, if I am honest with you, was never really the whole point. The money was the leverage. The real repair happened somewhere else entirely. My daughter did something I did not expect. She told him that if he ever again spoke about me the way he had that week, as someone to be managed, hidden from, kept at arm's length for his own comfort, she would not be staying to watch it happen a second time. I don't know everything that was said behind their closed doors in the weeks that followed, and it is not my business to know all of it. What I do know is that the following Thanksgiving, I was not just invited to their home. I was asked by my daughter in front of him to say the blessing at the head of the table, in the seat that had quietly, wordlessly become mine again. He and I are not close, not in the way I once hoped we might be. I don't think that particular bridge fully rebuilds after something like this. But he is respectful now in a way he was not before, and I believe some small part of that respect is simply the plain fact that he learned the hard way that the quiet old woman at the edge of the family gathering keeps very good records, and asks for what is hers eventually, one way or another. I share this story with you not to boast about winning some family battle, because honestly, there is very little to celebrate in a family that nearly broke itself apart over money and pride and silence. I share it because I know I am not the only mother sitting somewhere tonight who has been quietly pushed to the edges of her own family, told in one soft sentence or another that her presence is somehow the problem, when the truth is she has simply stopped being convenient to somebody else's comfort. If that is you tonight, hear me clearly. You do not have to shout to be heard. You do not have to cause a scene to be respected. Sometimes the most powerful thing an older woman can do is stay calm, keep her paperwork in order, know exactly what she is owed and exactly what she deserves, and simply quietly refuse to disappear. I am 71 years old. I have given this family more than money. I have given it my time, my patience, my worry, my prayers. And I learned something at 71 that I wish someone had told me at 40. Love does not mean making yourself smaller so someone else can feel comfortable in the space you used to occupy. Love, real love, family love, should never require your own quiet erasure as the price of admission. If this story meant something to you, do me a kindness and hit that like button, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one, because I have plenty more where this came from. And down in the comments, I would love to know, where are you watching this from tonight? I read every single comment, and it means more to me than you know to picture all of you, all over the world sitting somewhere quiet, listening to an old woman tell her story. Until next time, take care of yourselves and never, ever let anyone convince you that you don't belong at your own table.